Hi everybody. So I tried doing this video before, like I tried doing it earlier, but I think I read the article too much and then I kind of um, went off in like not necessarily a tangent, but I started to go off in like other topics and I just don't want to do the same thing again. So basically what I'll do with this is that I'll leave the link to this in the description box. And as you can see, the article is in regards to Puerto Rican households in the U.S. And this was written from the Center for Puerto Rican Studies from Hunter College, and it was issued in December of 2016. So it's not necessarily new, but it's not ancient either. And I think that considering the numbers and stuff on here, I would think that things are probably not too much. We're not faring too much better from this point, with this only being a few years old. So I'm gonna just kind of scroll through through some things, okay. And I think I'm gonna like read some things and then I'm gonna kind of show like the charts, okay. So I'm gonna read this here starting from where compared begins. Compared to the distribution of all U.S. households, the sharpest differences among Puerto Rican households were seen in the underrepresented proportion of married male-female couples and overrepresentation of single female-headed households. Married male-female households accounted for nearly half of all U.S. households, 48.3%, but only 36.4% of all Puerto Rican households in the U.S. Non-Puerto Rican Hispanic households had a higher proportion of married male-female households. See Table 1. The majority of this difference was found in the proportion of single female householders. Okay? I just want to kind of make that a point. Among Puerto Rican homes, more than 1 in 3, 36.5% households belong to single female householders. This proportion was 28.1% among all U.S. households and lower among non-Puerto Rican Hispanic households. 25.1%. Proportions of single male households were similar among all three populations, ranging from 16.4% among non-Puerto Rican Hispanics to 17.5% among all U.S. households and 17.9% among Puerto Ricans in the U.S. Among Puerto Rican Hispanics and non-Puerto Rican Hispanics, the proportion of unmarried male-female couples was consistent at 8.5%, higher than the 5.5% proportion among all households in the U.S. Same-sex couples represented less than 1% of households across all three populations, accounting for 0.7% of all Puerto Rican households, 0.6% of all households in the U.S., and 0.5% of non-Puerto Rican Hispanic households. Okay? So I'm just going to kind of scroll through these tables because this is kind of long here. And it shows the head relationship to head of households, okay? And look at how high this is. Okay? 570,138. Okay? That's pretty high. And then female householders of Puerto Ricans with children. This is actually not so bad. This is married female male couples, so that's not so bad. At least that's higher than this number here, but this number is still pretty high. 54.8 is still pretty high, being female householders, so they're like the head of the household. All right. And then here, this table shows just the levels of education and how we fare off from like some other groups. So female householders only 14.5%. Some college 29.5%. Okay, Married couples, 32.3. Okay. So basically, our rates for college aren't that high. All right. So it's like we fall between some high school and I mean some college and graduating high school. But there's not a really high percentage of us that have degrees. Look at the males, 12%. And I see these things and I'm disheartened, but at the same time I kind of, it makes sense to a degree, like because there's a lot of times that I question, like, well, why not that I know that there's Puerto Ricans on here that do commentaries on different things, but again, I haven't really found anybody that does any type of stats or kind of talks about certain problems and issues that we're just the things that we're going through living here in this country. And I really don't hear too many people talk about that. I mean, if anything, what I hear of or what I see of in comments has more to do with people distancing themselves from Puerto Ricans here in the States. But I don't really necessarily see anything else that kind of proves why this group is in the shape that it's in. So, and then this shows the employment rates, the unemployment rates. And the men are doing a little bit better in the employment rates than the women are. So you have 46.1% with male householders, and you have 45.7% with female householders. But if you look with regards to not in the labor force, 42.5% of males, 45.1% of the females. That's a lot. Okay? And then you see here, same-sex female and males, they're actually pretty, on the higher end, the same-sex couples are on the higher end, and they're also on the higher end with the educational attainment too. Their percentages are higher. You see, 34.8%, and with same-sex females, 38.4%. So 34.8 for the males, 38.4 for the women in same-sex couples. Okay. Now this was really disheartening. Okay. This was one of the things that I've been talking about in videos. When I say how we're the poorest or one of the poorest groups in the country, and if you look at this number here with female householders, and there's it's over 54% of Puerto Rican households are run by females, but look at the amount that they're making a year: $21,053 annually. And now again, this is a little old. As you can see, this says that this was from 2014, but we're not faring that much better than this. Okay, this report is not that old. And as you can see, compared to other female households, just in general, that's 28,872. And then other Latin groups, 25,778. I don't even know how people are surviving. I have no idea how these women are surviving. I have the slightest. And as you can see here, with same-sex couples, 78,213 annually, and the males make the most. So gay male Puerto Rican couples make 85,457 on average, and that's pretty high. From what I saw, same-sex females actually have a slightly higher percent of educational attainment. Let's see. Oh no, it's just some college that they have more. Okay, so the men do have they have higher levels of education than same-sex females, and that's why they're making so much. So it's gay Puerto Rican men that are making the most. Okay? Let's see. And there's something that I wanted to like point out here. So, final notes. This was something that stood out to me earlier. Puerto Rican households are disproportionately comprised of single householders when compared to all U.S. households and those of non-Puerto Rican Hispanics. More than half, 54.4% of all Puerto Rican households are headed either by a single male, 17.9%, or by a single female, 36.5%. Among all U.S. households, these proportions are 17.5% for single male-led households and 28.1% for single female-led households, and 16.4% for single male-led households and 25.1% for single female-led households among non-Puerto Rican Hispanics. Most of this difference in single households is observed in the larger Puerto Rican proportion of single female households. Among Puerto Rican households, single households tended to underperform joint households in terms of income, educational attainment, and labor force participation. However, the proportion of single female households living with children was 54.9%, a figure greater than the 51.8% proportion for all Puerto Rican households. Given the financial obligation children present and the relatively lower median incomes, lower levels of labor force participation, higher unemployment rates, and subpar levels of educational attainment, single female households are not only the most common type of Puerto Rican household in the U.S., but the most acutely vulnerable. Okay? So I figured I'd share that with you guys. I hope you all sat through this. I'm gonna leave the link to it in the description box. I thought this was a really interesting article. I am an alum of this school. This is where I graduated from. So it's only fitting that when I see these things, it kind of correlates to a lot of stuff that I learned several years ago, though, since this came out after I graduated. So, and just kind of disheartening. It is kind of disheartening, but it's also very interesting. And like, we're just basically like a forgotten group, and as a forgotten group, we're just not we're just having a hard time progressing. So anyhow, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I guess I will see you all in the next one. Bye.